You open your eyes to gray sky and the smell of horse manure and wood smoke. Not a dream. Not a hospital. Not anywhere you recognize. The ground beneath you is cold, hard-packed dirt surrounded by mud and straw. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith is hammering metal. Somewhere further, a rooster is screaming, like it personally holds a grudge against morning. You sit up slowly and immediately notice three things. Your clothes are wrong. Your phone has no signal, and the man standing 10 feet away is wearing chainmail, carrying a sword, and looking at you like you're either a ghost or a problem he hasn't decided how to handle yet. You're in Westeros, not the HBO set, not a theme park, the actual world. Dirt under your fingernails, wind cutting through clothing too thin for this climate, and no way home that you can immediately identify. You don't know how. You don't know why. What you know is the man in chainmail is still staring. His hand has moved to the hilt of his sword, and you need to say something convincing in the next 5 seconds, or this story ends before it begins. You say you're a traveler. Lost. No weapons. No threat. He squints, then he spits. Then he walks away, which in Westeros counts as a warm welcome. The first thing you understand about this world is that it doesn't care about you. Not personally. It doesn't care about anyone particularly. Westeros is a machine built on hierarchy, and hierarchy here is enforced not by paperwork or law, but by steel and birth. You are neither noble nor known, which means you are nothing, less than nothing. You are a mouth without a name, and mouths without names get conscripted, robbed, or ignored depending on the day. You're somewhere in the north. You figure that out from the accents, the cold, and the gray stone architecture that looks like it was designed specifically to make people feel small. The village you've landed near is called Nothing Important. 30 families, a sept nobody uses, a tavern that doubles as a courthouse, and a gossip exchange. The lord of this land is a minor bannerman whose name you've never heard because he never made it into the show. That's your first advantage. You know the story, you know the major beats, you know who wins, who dies, who betrays whom, and approximately when the world ends. What you don't know is how that helps a nameless outsider with no money, no family, and no sword arm survive long enough to use that knowledge. You start small. You work at the tavern, carrying barrels and listening to everything. In Westeros, information moves through taverns, the way blood moves through veins. Merchants talk. Ravens arrive and get read aloud by men who like the sound of their own authority. Soldiers drink and brag. You absorb everything and say almost nothing, which people mistake for stupidity, and which is actually the safest thing you can possibly be. Within 2 weeks, you know the local power structure. The Bannerman Lord is loyal to the Starks. His oldest son wants to squire for someone important and resents that nobody important has noticed him yet. His steward is skimming grain from the stores and covering it with adjusted records. The miller's wife knows things about everyone and trades that information for nothing, because knowing things is its own reward for certain kinds of people. You befriend the miller's wife first. Not romantically, strategically. She's the most dangerous person in the village because she understands leverage and isn't afraid to use it. You help her with her accounts, which she keeps in her head imperfectly, and in exchange, she tells you everything about everyone. In a world without internet, gossip networks run by sharp women are the closest thing to intelligence services. You use what you learn carefully. You tell the Lord's steward that you've noticed certain discrepancies in the grain accounts, and that you'd be happy to help correct them quietly rather than loudly. The steward goes pale. By morning, you have a position as an assistant to the maester, which isn't glamorous, but gives you access to ravens, correspondence, and the Lord's private concerns. The maester is old and tired, and mostly wants someone to do the parts of his job he finds tedious. You do them without complaint. You learn to read the ravens. You learn which houses are allied, which are feuding, which are quietly positioning themselves for something larger. You begin to understand that Westeros doesn't run on dragons and battles. It runs on letters, debts, arrangements made in private that become history in public. 3 months pass. Then, the ravens start carrying news from King's Landing that you already know. King Robert Baratheon is dead. The political situation is deteriorating faster than the small folk understand. You know exactly what's coming. The War of the Five Kings, Winter, the Red Wedding, Wildfire, Armies of the Dead. You have a choice. Stay small and quiet, and survive by staying beneath the notice of everyone powerful enough to be dangerous. Or use what you know to position yourself somewhere safer before the world starts burning. You choose positioning, which is either very smart or very stupid, depending on how well you execute it. You draft a letter to Winterfell under the Master's seal. Nothing dramatic, just a carefully worded note about certain military movements south of the neck that you've pieced together from 3 different ravens that arrived separately and weren't meant to be read together. You include a detail only someone with real intelligence access could know. You sign it with no name, just a symbol. The response comes 3 weeks later. Not from Winterfell, from a man who rides alone, dressed in traveling clothes too plain for the horse he's riding. He finds you in the tavern, sits across from you, orders nothing, and asks one question. Who are you? You tell him the truth. You're no one important. You're just someone who reads carefully and thinks ahead. He studies you for a long time. Then he says, Lord Stark has use for people who read carefully and think ahead. The pay is modest. The danger is considerable. The alternative is spending the rest of your short life carrying barrels. You go with him the next morning. Winterfell is exactly what you expected, and nothing like you imagined. The show made it cinematic. In person, it's massive, cold, loud, smelling of horses and forged smoke and roasting meat. The Stark family is exactly who they are on screen. Ned Stark has the gravity of a man who believes honor is its own reward, which you know will kill him faster than any sword. His children are younger than they seemed on television. Robb has the easy confidence of a boy who has never been truly afraid yet. Arya is precisely as alarming in person as she was on screen. You say nothing about what you know. That's the rule you set for yourself. You can use your knowledge to position yourself safely. You cannot use it to play God with individual lives. Not because you're noble, but because changing individual events in a story, this complex creates ripples you cannot predict. You know the broad strokes. You don't know what happens if you change them. You work as an information coordinator. Essentially, you read correspondence, identify patterns, flag things that seem unconnected but aren't, and report to people above you, who then make decisions you have no authority over. It's the same job you had in the village, but at a larger scale, with higher consequences. Ned trusts you within limits because you've been useful without being ambitious, which in Westeros is practically a character reference. Then Ned goes south to King's Landing, and you know, with absolute certainty, that he's walking into his own execution. You write him a letter, coded, careful, deniable. It says nothing specific. It says only that certain men's loyalty runs to gold rather than honor, and that a wise man counts his friends carefully before he counts his enemies. It's the most you can do without revealing what you are. Whether he reads it, whether it changes anything, you never learn. What you know is that ravens stop coming from King's Landing for 11 days. Then they arrive all at once, like a flood. Ned Stark is dead. The kingdom is at war. Everything you knew was coming has begun arriving on schedule. Winterfell erupts. Not into panic exactly, into purpose. The North mobilizes the way cold places mobilize, quietly and completely. Robb rides south with an army, and the certainty of someone who doesn't know yet that certainty is the most dangerous thing a man can carry into war. You stay north not out of cowardice, out of calculation. The Red Wedding is coming. Anyone riding with Robb Stark toward a Frey castle is riding toward the worst night in the history of this world. You know the date within a season. You know the location. You know the sound of a certain song. That means the killing is about to start. That knowledge sits in your chest like a stone you can't put down. You tell yourself you can't save everyone, that the story will correct itself around individual interventions, that you're one person with no army and no name, and no power to redirect the current of events this large. You're probably right. You're also possibly rationalizing the fact that survival requires a kind of moral compartmentalization that this world teaches brutally and fast. Winter arrives before the war ends. Not the metaphorical winter everyone warned about for years, the actual one. Cold that makes every previous cold feel like memory. You're in a castle in the north when the ravens stop coming from beyond the wall, which means what you always knew it would mean. The dead are moving. The army nobody wanted to believe in is real and enormous and coming. You've survived 2 years in Westeros by being useful, quiet, and positioned slightly to the left of every disaster. You know the broad shape of what's coming. Dragon, battle, fire. You know who lives and who dies in the version of this story you watched. But stories don't survive contact with reality unchanged. You're standing on the walls of a northern castle watching the tree line when you realize that knowing the plot doesn't make you safe, it makes you aware. Those are very different things. Awareness without power is just a front row seat to everything you can't stop. You pull your cloak tighter against the cold. The ravens are silent. The tree line isn't moving yet. But it will. You know exactly when, and you're still not ready.